Yeah, welcome to ShareTreck, where science meets investments, and I'm your host, Raj. Friends, this is my weekend update or weekend editorial, as I call it. Today, we are talking about an economic policy that has boomeranged back onto its own economy, U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, and how they're wreaking havoc on Detroit's auto industry. We'll explore how this is impacting jobs, prices, and cross-border supply chains, and how Canada is responding in kind to protect its industries. And friends, this comes from a Canadian perspective. I'm an Indo-Canadian. So that said, let's get into it. Welcome back, friends. The Detroit Three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, are some of the most iconic names in American manufacturing. But behind their operation lies a deep, integrated North American supply chain, especially with Canada. Tariffs imposed on Canadian steel have thrown a wrench into the system. Since the tariffs announcements, steel prices in the US have jumped by 10 to 15%. And for Detroit automakers who rely heavily on Canadian steel and aluminum for chassis, frames, and engine component, this just isn't an accounting problem, it's a production crisis. Ford reported that in just one quarter, tariffs cost them over $800 million. General Motors went further, projecting annual losses between $4 and $5 billion. That's a staggering figure even for companies of this size. It's not just about costs, it's also about jobs. When raw materials become more expensive and logistics become more complicated, automakers have to cut costs somewhere else to stay a going concern. And that often means workers. Employment cost is one of the biggest numbers that you have in a profit and loss statement. And that's where they cut. Detroit companies have already laid off hundreds of employees and delayed planned investments. Some have even floated shifting production outside North America entirely to avoid dealing with the tariff situation. Planned slowdowns and reduced shifts are becoming more common in both Canada and the US. Auto workers are facing layoffs, contract delays, and ongoing uncertainty. For communities that rely on automotive manufacturing, the ripple effects are devastating. The North American auto supply chain is a marvel of modern logistics. Parts often cross the border several times before final assembly. But now, each of these crossings requires tariff adjustments and origin verification. The result? Administrative overload, compliance costs, and shipping delays. For example, a single transmission might cross from Ontario to Michigan and back multiple times during assembly. Each crossing now involves paperwork, inspections, and delays, which directly translates to higher costs and longer lead times. This doesn't just affect big players. Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers across the Great Lake region are struggling to stay competitive. All of this eventually lands on the shoulders of the consumer. Higher steel and aluminum prices means higher vehicle prices. Industry analysts now estimate that the average new car in the US could see price increases ranging from $800 to $1,500, depending on the model and material sourcing. And in a market where affordability is already strained, that seems to be a major blow. With rising interest rates and fewer incentives, consumers are being priced out of new vehicle purchases, which could lead to declining sales volumes and increased pressure on dealerships across North America. Well, friends, I'll take this opportunity to thank you for watching this video if you have seen it so far. If you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe and help me grow this channel for all of us retail investors. Canada didn't stay silent. In response to US tariffs, Canadian officials, including Prime Minister Mark Carney and Industry Minister Melanie Joly, have condemned the moves as unjustified and illegal. While Canada hasn't gone nuclear with retaliation, it has begun targeted countermeasures. Most notably, Canada imposed a 25% retaliatory tariff on selected US vehicle imports and components designed to hit key sectors without escalating the dispute across the board. And Canada is, I think, playing smart. As a Canadian, of course, that's the way I'm going to think about it. Canada, by being selective and signaling openness to negotiation, avoids damaging its own economy while defending domestic interests. And at this point of time, all the parties in Canada are united. And this has kind of made a Canadian unity a very strong symptom of the times. And I see it everywhere. All opposition parties, everybody are united to defend the Canadian interest. A lesser known consequence of US tariffs is global steel redirection. With the US market harder to access, surplus steel from countries like China or Turkey risks flooding into Canada. To counter that, Canada introduced new rate quotas or tariff rate quotas or TRQs effective June 27, 2025. Steel imports that exceed 2024 levels from countries without free trade agreements now face a 50% surtax. This ensures the Canadian market doesn't get distorted while still preserving access for essential domestic users. Importantly, these quotas are set to be reviewed periodically, giving Canada flexibility as global dynamics shift. On the home front, Canada is doubling down on domestic steel production. Federal support for infrastructure projects, tax credits for green steel production, and incentives for Canadian-made auto parts are part of a long-term resilience strategy. It's about reducing dependence while still engaging in trade diplomacy. And Canada's measured approach, retaliation without escalation, is being praised by industry stakeholders for providing stability during uncertain times. Zooming out, this isn't just a US versus Canada story. It's a warning sign about the dangers of deeply disrupting integrated supply chains in pursuit of short-term political gains. Trade wars are rarely one-sided. The US may have intended to protect its domestic steel industry, but it's come at the cost of destabilizing its most iconic manufacturing sector, automobiles. Both countries need each other. The future of North American manufacturing, from EVs to traditional vehicles, depends on predictable tariff-free access to raw materials and parts. Without it, capital investment dries up, jobs disappear, and the competitive edge slips away. Now, my question to you is, guys, how do you feel this is playing out? Would you support zero tariff agreements with strategic partners like Canada? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And those of the Canadians who are watching this, please comment and let me know whether you think this is just about tariffs or there is something much more deeper, because Canada has been singled out, for example, with the highest tariffs despite being culturally and otherwise very well integrated with the US right from the inception times. So I would like to hear comments from the Canadians as well. So that brings me to an end of this video, my friends. Bye for now. I'll catch up with you in the next video. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can keep getting most of my videos on a regular basis.